Snow Treasure Chapter 10. Soon would come the moment the four children dreaded, the first German sentry. Per Garson said the Nazis were on their way to the town, but the children had not seen them. The rest of the morning had been spent pulling the heavy sleds through the woods. They had to go almost all the way back to Ryswick before they could begin to toboggan down the mountain. What would happen? What if the Nazis refused to allow them to go on? What if, somehow, they suspected and began to search the sled? Peter wouldn't let him think of what might happen. He made up stories about the four of them. They were Vikings, and their sleds were Viking boats. They were sailing the seas. They would go far, far away. The very nearest they would go would be to America. "Peter, I'm hungry. Let's eat," Michael proposed when they were barely out of the woods. But Peter had wanted to get a start on the long ride down the mountain. When Michael repeated his request a little later, he agreed. It's an idea, he thought. It would postpone their first brush with the Sentinels. "Girls, we eat!" Michael yelled. They pulled up on a bank beside the road. Their sleds in a cluster, they sat munching the dark bread, dried fish, cheese, and cold meat. "Come on, Michael, race you to the lookout!" Peter wiped his mouth on the back of his mitten. The lookout was where Peter and Michael, Helga and Lovisa had seen Uncle Victor the day he had so strangely returned to Norway. But now, when the four companions reached that point, it was not to be the scene of a snow battle and all the fun that went with it. Instead, there were solemnness and silence, and Lovisa's blue eyes were round with fright. The lookout today revealed an entirely different sight, and one to strike fear into the stoutest. A German freighter was at anchor in the fjord. Steaming up, she might be about to sail. On the beach that lay between the Atlantic Ocean and Ryswick Fjord, there were hundreds of gray-clad soldiers, and there were others on the narrow strip of land between the big fjord and the small one they called the Snake. They were unloading enormous supplies because the snow was covered with bales, boxes, crates, and drums. Rifles were stacked in neat rows, and up and down the beach in front of the fishing pier, sentries were goose-stepping while their companions worked. "Whew!" Peter drew off his cap to wipe his forehead. And now Lovisa was not the only one to be afraid. Fear looked out of all eyes. It was Helga who made them brave again. "I'm not afraid of any goose-step." She shook the curls that hung like sausages from her hood. "What's there to be afraid of?" "Come on, then." Peter straightened his shoulders. He drew his sled away from the others. "Let's go." "Look!" Michael could not take his eyes off the beach. "Soldiers marching right up our sled track. How'll we get down?" They turned back to the sight below. Michael was right. A company of men had started up the only road that led from the sea to the mountain. "We could hide till they passed," Lovisa urged. "Or go down over the rocks," Michael suggested. "But what do we do with our sleds? We couldn't take them down that way," Peter replied. "We'll have to meet them sometime," Helga said. "It might as well be now as later." "Right," Peter answered. "Uncle Victor said they were to see us today on our sleds. If we sail right into them, they'll see us for sure. Come on, keep to the side and try not to spill any of 'em, for that'd be bad for us." He fell face down on his sled. With a shove, he began the descent to the beach. The Germans were a long way off. The road made several turns in the miles between the lookout and the shore below, and only from the lookout could any part of the road be seen. So there was no way to tell if the Germans would turn off before they met them. Maybe they're not coming all the way, Peter told himself. Maybe they'll turn aside. But when he rounded the slope's last bend, he had no such hope. Directly in front was a company of gray-clad, goose-stepping soldiers. Even on the glassy surface, their legs swung out straight as rods. Peter had no way to stop himself, and now he found he was headed right into the middle of them. He let out a war whoop, a warning he was coming, but the Germans were directly in his path. He didn't see how he could avoid knocking them down like 10-pins. He was going to spill them all right, try as he might not to. It was the worst possible thing he knew. Near at hand, these grim, gray marching soldiers towered like giants to the boy on his sled. Down he flew, faster, faster. At 100 yards, he swerved toward the bank to avoid knocking down a whole row of men. A voice was barking a command in German, and the company took 3 steps to the side and out of Peter's path. His swerve drove him into the bank and stopped him as he had not dared to hope. But he had already passed the first of the troops. Only their quick side march had saved a collision. He raised his eyes from the snow. He was looking into the smiling face of a German infantry captain. I turned my men aside. He spoke in Norwegian. It is not right that we spoil your sledding. When I was a boy, I liked nothing better than sledding.